because a majority of the breweries by number in the US are very, very small and would not be wise for them to be contracting thousands of pounds of single varietals. As much as brewers need to alter their way of thinking, the hop industry is having to do the very same thing. And what you're seeing as a result of that is, you're seeing a lot more of these limits come down, and there's more availability for those types of things, more options for brewers nowadays, because the merchants and the brewers, it has to be a symbiotic relationship. It can't just be one sucking the other dry, because they need each other.
You are listening to the Capital of Craft podcast, brought to you by the San Diego Brewers Guild. I'm your host, Eric Fowler, and today we sit down with Steve Burchill of Hollingbery Son Hops. Thank you for sitting down with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah. As long as we've been in the industry, hops has been probably the number one spoken about ingredient. But today, it seems like within the industry and our internal communities, we're speaking about them a little differently, a little more cynical, a little bit more about the business side of them, and not always much about the process side or how it contributes to the finished beer.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. I mean, just as, the general landscape for breweries shift, they're going to focus on different things. And right now, what's important to a lot of breweries is cost and mitigating those costs and, keeping your brewery healthy and functional. So I think it's natural that people look more right now, maybe a little bit towards, the economic side of them.
Yeah, and it's probably something that we should have taken a little bit more serious 5-10 years ago, right?
Certainly. I mean, there was definitely a Wild West era of hop purchasing, if you will, where, everyone was just signing contracts a little bit more aggressively than necessarily they needed. And that was just a result of hops being scarce before that. So it was reactionary in that way. And so, there was a period of just buy whatever you want and we'll make it work. And then we're kind of hitting the back end of that reaction right now is what we're starting to see in the hop industry.
Yeah, there's been so much bobbing and weaving and different varieties coming to market. And I still, we'll go into a brewery and look at a brewer's recipe sheet, and it's still a lot of the same hops that were popular in like 2010 when I first started really getting immersed in the industry. It's interesting to see the longevity of some of these.
I mean, there's definitely the main, we're talking Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe, these main varietals that are not only the most produced hops in the US, but are the most used hops in the US. They're never going to go anywhere. They're entrenched in, or it would seem like they're never going to go anywhere currently. They're entrenched in brewing culture. I would say, while there are a bunch of new varietals around and there's a lot more push towards those, you will not see any of those older, those three, or even, the core C hops, Cascade, Chinooks, all those types readily go away. They're around for the long haul, but there are tons of new comers to the field, and there's a lot of compelling ones as well.
Yeah, there was a cool Instagram graphic going around a couple weeks ago that was a list of like 30 hops, and everybody got to circle their top 5. And it was interesting to see all the, kind of Saw's Hollow Tower and C hops. I'm a big Chinook fan, so I kind of always lean that way. Like 100% Chinook beer was pretty polarizing for a lot of people, but that's kind of what I defined as an IPA for a long time. So you've been in the San Diego industry for quite some time. Would you give the audience a little background on how you came to be in the position of selling hops now, and maybe how you've worked with hops over the years and seen that side of the industry change?
Sure. Yeah. I started my career in beer in 2007 at Ballast Point. That was the year that they started ramping up Sculpin. So I just remember that whole crazy era of watching that beer blow up. I was there for 5 years. I brewed there and then made the switch over to Lost Abbey in 2012. And I worked there from 2012 until last year, 2023. So it was a little bit over 10 years. For the last 7 of those years, I was the head brewer. And in that position is when I really started to learn a lot more about hops, deal with them a lot more intimately. And it's ultimately where I met Matt Hollingbery, who is now who I work for, because we purchased quite a bit of hops from them at Lost Abbey. So that is how I came to be here. And I can say that during my time at Lost Abbey, one of my absolute favorite trips, if not my favorite trip every year to make, was to harvest in Yakima every year. Not only was it fun and you got to meet a bunch of great brewers that were up there because they cared about the quality of their beer, but also you got a lot better insight of what was in store for you that crop year, what maybe, what issues there may have been during that harvest or anything like that. And you can also potentially avoid any problematic lots by going up there and selecting those things. So that was really where I fell in love with the hop industry. And I'm really excited to now be able to sell hops for Hollingbery. So
yeah, that experience definitely lends a lot of credibility and real world experience with it.
Looking for a better hop supplier? Consider Hollingbery Hops. Hollingbery has been quietly supplying hops to the industry for over 80 years. Yakima Valley based and family owned, Hollingbery takes great pride in being truly independent to provide the best hops to their customers. Hollingbery runs one of the most modern pellet mills in the country, producing some of the highest quality pelletized hops. And best yet, they offer no minimums for contracts or hop selection. In a challenging hop market, having a trusted partner like Hollingbery is invaluable. See for yourself at hollingberyandson.com and click shop to get started. Reach out to your local San Diego rep for more information. Now is a harder time than ever for breweries to navigate the rapidly changing market, but Beer Media Co. is here to help. As a proud partner of the San Diego Brewers Guild, we are a full-service digital marketing and content creation company that works with San Diego breweries to reach new customers and create amazing engagement for their websites and social media accounts. If you are a small brewery owner trying to figure out the whole social media thing, or a larger brewery looking to up their engagement, send us a message at info@beermedia.co because we know SD Beer. Malt Europe Malting Company is based in North America, specializing in growing and producing quality malts for the craft beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, our commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch we produce, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit www.malteuropemaltingco.com to learn how Malt Europe can support your malting needs. Contact us at customersuccess@malteurope.com or 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order.
When you first kind of came into more of those senior brewing roles, did you have a lack of knowledge or something that you wish you understood more about hops, whether it was how to utilize them? I mean, a lot of techniques have come up over the years and in your span of your career even, but is there something that, from point A to starting those senior positions to where you are now, is there something that you wish you knew earlier in your career?
Absolutely. I started out with, I would call it a rigidity, or, I didn't want to, I thought that, well, this hop has to go here and I can't ever, that's what it's got to be. And the true nature of it is that you can get creative when using hops and you can find unique uses for them that solve your issues that you may be having, or, create unique beers in the process of doing that. So, I would say that just maybe I was a little too rigid in the way that I thought hops had to be used, and this varietal is used only here or only there, and that kind of thing. And the other thing is, being a little hesitant to, every brewer I've ever talked to is somewhat hesitant of older crop year hop. And I was very much one of those guys back in the day. And the more I learned about it, the more that I, had to use older crop year hops because of maybe where we were in a contract or something like that. I realized that that's not necessarily a bad thing. And that's something that I'm going to talk about a little later, but that's a huge thing I think that I learned later on, for sure.
As the technology and understanding on how to properly store hops, has that improved? Like when in 2010, if you were to go 3 or 4 years back on crop years, would you expect poorer quality than, say, going back 3 or 4 years today?
Yes, certainly. I wouldn't necessarily say that it would be, you still might be able to open a bag of 2007 hops and be shocked at what they smell like. There has definitely been improvements since then in the way that we package and store hops. But the reality is that if the aroma of the hop, if it's packaged well, should maintain, if it's stored cold and packaged well, for 5 years. Unless you're seeing unusually high HSI numbers at, package when you see the COA come through.
And what is HSI?
Hop storage index.
Okay.
It's a measure of essentially how well they were packaged with little oxygen, all that type of stuff. So,
okay. So it would be comparable to like total dissolved oxygen in a can.
Similar. And so to give some example, a very low HSI to see in a package year one is, 0.230, somewhere around there. That's a really nice number. As you get to the 0.3 range, that's a little higher than you'd like to see, but under 0.3 is generally very acceptable for HSI. So as long as you're seeing the proper HSI numbers and you're storing them cold, you should be fairly confident that those aromas will be preserved for at least 5 years. And I mean, always check your hops before you use them, I would say. Always give them a rub, especially if you haven't used them recently. But we've seen brewers using old crop year hops with great success lately.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how does that equate to different types of concentrates and alternative hop products that are besides, whole cone and T90s? What does storage look like there? And are there ways of preserving an older hop by putting it into a different format?
What you can do with really, old crop year stuff that's not going to necessarily be used for aromas, you can extract them for alpha acid, extract, which just provides bitterness. And actually that will kind of lead me into, just using flowables in general. But there are certain things you can do with older crop year hops, but as it relates to like what most brewers are wanting to use them for, which is aroma properties and getting that aroma, once they get that old, not generally, but as these flowables go into the future, there is potential where that's probably what they're doing currently, is extracting older crop year Citra, Mosaic to make these newer flowable products that you're now seeing. Those aren't going to be 5-year-old lots. Those are going to be 2-3-year-old lots that they're probably extracting now to make those flowables that everyone's now talking about and using in their brew process. So yes, there is uses, and they're trying to get more creative because, they're trying to mitigate and this is the people that are making these products are trying to mitigate some of the cost to themselves. They're sitting on a huge amount of product right now. There is about $1 billion worth of U.S. hops surplus from older crop years sitting in storage in the U.S. right now. And that is as a result of people over-contracting, and there just being this crazy boom on aroma hops, and people over-contracted for many years. And it finally came to a head, last year or so, or 2 years ago, really. And so for the last crop year, 2023, there was 9,000 or so acres of aroma hop pulled out of the ground. Or it's actually 9,000 net acres, but that was out of the 61 or so thousand total acres in the ground. So now we're down to around 50,000 going in for the 2023 crop year, and now going from 50,000 down to somewhere in the high 30s. So you're talking about 20% of the entire U.S. crop is coming out of the ground this year as a result of a massive surplus of aroma hops and a complete lack of contracting because of those aroma hops. So, yeah, I know I kind of shifted gears a little there, but it kind of took me right into that I wanted to talk about, was that currently spot hops are readily available. You can get whatever you want, current crop year, at a very reasonable price. That will be changing in the next 2 or 3 years, just as a result of how much hop is coming out of the ground.
So contracting is something, let's say I started a brewery in 2016 and got really excited, and, the hop reps are all knocking on my door. I've got my recipes that I know this is what I'm starting my brewery with. This is what I won my homebrew awards with, right? I'm going to scale this and it's going to go gangbusters. And that's happened for a lot of breweries. And we probably know the local breweries who are still capitalizing on those types of beers. But a lot of breweries, that never comes to fruition. They realize that maybe what their guests walking through the door are asking for is something different, or They have to now look at COGS and realize what an impact that has to, you can't charge $12 a pint. So I need to figure out how to make it a little more budget friendly. But, in that 2016 period and before, there was a lot of excitement where people were signing long contracts and trying to forecast out what they wanted. And for a 4,000 barrel brewery, that might have been really difficult. Did you find that to be pretty accurate? Or is that kind of what got us in this mess?
Yes, it is difficult. I will say that small breweries don't necessarily have a lot of places to turn to that will write any size of contract or the right size of contract for them. I do know that when I was at Lost Abbey, experienced having to meet minimums just to contract and select our hops. And those minimums were not very small. So some breweries did fall into that where they just so badly wanted to contract and select their hops that they contracted more than they needed just so that they could go up and select them.
Yeah. So is that almost like you could equate it to a car payment, right? Where like maybe I can't meet that 5-year loan to get my monthly payment to where it needs to be. So I kick it to 7 years instead. And that's probably not the best way of
you're
shooting
yourself in the foot,
kicking it down the road.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And all that did was leave that brewer with extra hop. And then what does he do next year? What do they do next year? Right. They used half of what they contracted and they want new crop year hop. Are they going to contract that same amount again and now be 2 years long after that? And so it very quickly gets out of hand and that's what happened to some people. So I don't want to, plug it too much, but one thing that Hollingbery does is no contract minimums or no minimums for selection. We're trying to make that having that control over your supply line be for everyone and not just for people that want to spend a ton of money. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we do there, but that's something that there's other people you can find that do as well.
Is that becoming more common now because of the long and the big asks from years ago?
I mean, it kind of has to become the thing. A majority of the breweries by number in the US are very, very small and would not be wise for them to be contracting thousands of pounds of single varietals. As much as brewers need to alter their way of thinking, the hop industry is having to do the very same thing. And what you're seeing as a result of that is, you're seeing a lot more of these limits come down and there's more availability for those types of things, more options for brewers nowadays, because the merchants and the brewers, it has to be a symbiotic relationship. It can't just be one sucking the other dry because they need each other. If there's one goes away, the other's not there anymore. So it has to change. And so you are seeing more of that around the industry for sure.
Attention brewing professionals. Are you looking to elevate your presence in the heart of San Diego's craft beer industry? Consider joining the San Diego Brewers Guild as a professional or affiliate member today. Access exclusive benefits designed to propel your craft to new heights. Gain entry to premier industry events and educational resources, and forge vital connections within our brewing community. Visit sdbeer.com to explore the full list of advantages that a membership offers. Join the Capital Craft Podcast and the San Diego Brewers Guild, celebrating craft beer in San Diego since 1997.
Support for this episode comes from BSG, proud partner of the San Diego Brewers Guild and wholly owned subsidiary of the RAR Corporation. With the select ingredients, industry experience, and dedicated customer service you need to create outstanding beers, BSG is ready to assist you in everything from recipe formulation to troubleshooting. Located within easy reach of most breweries, BSG serves San Diego area brewers from Oceanside, California. Become a customer today at bsgcraftbrewing.com.
When these farms are making drastic decisions of reducing the size of their crop by 20%, if things were to swing back the other way, what type of lead time would they need to be able to replant and then have mature plants moving forward? Is it one season, or does it take a couple seasons to really develop the plant?
It kind of depends a lot on the varietal. In that case, in some cases you can get a decent yield year one, but generally you're talking about at least one down yield year for those first year rootstock plants. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the growers aren't making cuts just because they want to. They're making these cuts because merchants like us aren't giving them the contracts, but we're not giving them contracts because we've seen a huge drop in contracts from brewers. And so, no one wants to speculate and leave yourself exposed. So just as we don't want to speculate and buy hops we're not fairly certain we can sell, growers aren't going to speculate and put a ton of money into growing hops that they're not certain they can sell. And so that is just what they do. They just pull the hops out of the ground. So, you're going to see varietals like Citra and Mosaic are going to take absolutely the biggest hit this year. But that's also where the biggest surplus lies. So that's not as much of a concern. Another concern this year with all of these cuts is that some of the more ancillary and not as popular varietals like Liberty or Golding may not be planted at all. Just because, maybe brewers like to use them in one-off seasonals and really, but no one wants to go out and contract a little bit of that and a little bit of this. So I'll just go find it on spot. And there's a very real risk that you're going to see some varietals just not planted at all this year and they may not come back. And that's a very, will remain to be seen because the numbers for this year aren't solidified. But, in a few months, we'll know what's in the ground and there's not much that you can do to change it after that point. So,
yeah, that's very interesting. All those gold nails being brewed out there are going to be hurting. But jokes aside, I mean, that the amount of information that's out there for, product matching, I think now is probably the better time than ever when it comes to, like you were mentioning, trying to replicate an aroma or a type of bitterness.
To go back to cost of goods a little bit, one thing that should be done absolutely to lower your cost, as I mentioned, is consider using older crop year hops. And you're talking about matching aroma and flavor when you're trying to, maybe switch out a hop here or there. But one thing you can do is if you really if let's say you're buying Centennial from somebody and you got a lot from 2021 or 2022 that you just really, really loved and you thought it was great, reach out to that, merchant and ask them, hey, is there more of that? Can I buy more of that? They'll probably give you a lower price because it's an older crop year. It's going to be the same exact varietal, the same exact lot you've been using. So that gives you your consistency right there and a lowered cost of goods all rolled into one. The hope is that people won't have to change their recipes because their favorite hops or that they liked for that went away. But in the case that they do, it is a good time to be having to do that because there's lots of new options around with new hop varietals and all this kind of stuff for you to examine. And that would lead into another way to mitigate costs. If you're writing recipes, try to, you can obviously, you're going to use your Citras and Mosaics, but look more at using some public varietals or some less expensive proprietaries, try to stick around the $9, $10 a pound range instead of the $13 a pound range. And you're going to see a huge, difference there over the long haul. So that's another thing I would absolutely recommend. You look at hops like Vista. There's some new USDA hops, HRC 003 coming out of the USDA. Some of the more affordable proprietaries like Anchovy, Zumo. There's a new American noble hop called Adina right now that is very compelling and has been making some really nice beer. So all of those are relatively affordable. I picked those specific ones because none of those really gets over like $11 a pound generally. So I would say that, getting more creative, getting more flexible with the way you're thinking about hops and trying new things and being aware of how to take a hop and put it in a beer and maybe learn from it without having to truly change everything you're doing. You don't have to make a completely new beer to learn how a hop behaves. You can meter it in and see where your sweet spots are. Or again, this goes for flowables, meter them in to find your desired yields and your desired quality levels. And it's a balancing act there. So
like what general percentage would you suggest somebody swaps a hop product out? Let's say we're talking about, T90s for one, but if you're using X amount,
if your Whirlpool is 100% T90 and you want to look into using a flowable, the way that I would recommend doing that is replacing 30% of your Whirlpool bill by alpha, essentially, because these flowables do have alpha. Replace 30% by alpha and see how that goes. You will notice an immediate yield increase, but you really want to focus on the end result and make sure that that flavor is where you want it. And it should be 30% is a pretty conservative amount, but it's a good starting point. From there, you can meter it up and up. And what you're doing there is obviously pulling out vegetal matter from those processes. And that vegetal matter does also impart flavor as well. So you will hit a point where the best way that I can describe is that the beer kind of tastes a little bit hollow from using too much advanced product.
Yeah, I've noticed that personally, where most of the hop forward beers of the last couple of years, that when I open it and pour it in a glass, I go like, damn, this is the best smelling beer I've ever had. But after a pint, there's generally some oomph that can be missing. And that's just my personal take. And I know the casual beer drinker tends to really like that in your face, slap you across the face with one specific type of aroma. But I think there's some finesse sometimes there's a middle ground that needs to be found.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I say start low, because everyone finds that point at a different, that's different for every brewer, and every brewer is ultimately going to make the beer that they want to make. And so that's why you can't just be like, this is the number that you replace it with. It has to be found by whoever's using it.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you are looking at using that kind of stuff, always erring on the lighter end, just to ensure that beer is still as you want it and sellable, which is the most important thing. Not dumping beer, saving money right now. That's the most important thing. So
what are you most excited about for the next 12 to 24 months in terms of the hop industry, the beer industry? What are you looking forward to?
I'm very encouraged just by quality overall, as something that this job has allowed me to do that I didn't really get to do a whole lot in my previous job, was just go out to different areas of the country and see what those, beer scenes have been like. Obviously was very fortunate to have 15 years in one of the best craft brewing towns in the country, if not the best. But what I can tell you is that all over the country is trying to get to where we are, and they're coming quick. The level of beer around the country right now that I've experienced has been very impressive. And I think that just, kind of a nod to a place like here. We've got such an established, great community here of brewers that unapologetically do what they're going to do, and they do make great beer because of it. That's where people want to be. And so, I was just in Austin. There's a local brewery called Meanwhile that just opened recently, make awesome beer, but they had one of their main beers is called Secret Beach, and it's a San Diego style IPA. I love to see that, and it was proper. It had good bitterness, and it was really, really well made. And I was just kind of like put a smile on my face. It reminded me of home. So yeah, I'm really excited with the overall quality of beer right now. It seems to be on a huge upslope, and I love it because I drink it. So
yeah, that's great. Well, I want to thank you for coming on today. Let everybody know where they can find you and what you got going on.
So yeah, you can find me at Burchill at hollingberyandson.com. That's BURCHILL at hollingberyandson.com. I'm sure there'll be a link somewhere that you guys can check out. And then just shoot me an email if you've got any requests about any specific hop varietals, or I also love to talk about technical stuff. All of our salespeople are ex-brewers or brewery managers, so we kind of love to talk on the technical side as well. If there's any issues you guys are having, we'd love to help out. But other than that, I'll put all my contact info and stuff in the link, and you can see it there.
Awesome. We'll see you around town at some of the Guild beer events too.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.